Always a fun sound. Hello, good afternoon-ish to everyone out there in Zoom world. Thank you for bearing with us as we discuss some last minute technical fun. My name is Lindsay Matz Benson. I use she, her pronouns. I am one of the, what do we call ourselves, Mo? Team leads for the professional development subgroup of the Student Learning and Information Literacy Committee. Long title there. We also call ourselves SLILC. And I wanted to just welcome you all and say thank you all for signing up for this wonderful panel that we have recruited these folks for today. So just kind of going over the agenda, which, you know, is fluid right now. We're going to hear presentations from first on Pressbooks from Sally Wilson and Ann Ludbrook, and Mo will be introducing them in just a moment. And then we're going to be immediately after that will be a presentation from Jamie Whitman about H5P. And then we are going to do some kind of a breakout or discussion or Q&A or however we want to do it. If folks have ideas, put them in the chat. We do have a collaborative Google Doc that we can work with as well. And we'll just kind of be discussing that as our presenters are going on. And then we're going to do a wrap up at about 10, when there's about 5 to 10 minutes left. But if we're all in one room together, we'll do it that way. So I'm going to hand it over to my wonderful colleague, Mo, who is the my other co-team lead for this group. And she will take care of doing some more introductions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hello, everyone. My name is Mo Chakraborty. I am the Director of External Library Services at Salisbury University and Eastern Shore of Maryland. And we are very thankful. We have a wonderful presenters, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. Ann Ludbrook is the Copyright and Scholarly Engagement Librarian from Toronto Metropolitan University Libraries. Sally Wilson is the Web Services Librarian at the same library, Toronto Metropolitan University Libraries, and they will be presenting on Pressbooks. Jamie Whitman is the Open Educational Practices Specialist at the Open Education Network, and she will talk about H5P. I also want to give a shout out to our wonderful team members, Jennifer Shimada, Sylvia Wong, Carly Reason, Kapil Vasudev, and Maria Ruelas. And I'm also thankful to our SLILC leadership, Melissa Malone and Amanda Falk. Presenters, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Mo. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay. So welcome, everyone. As previously mentioned, Anne and I are librarians at Toronto Metropolitan University. We've been involved with open education resources for over 10 years, and we've been hosting our own instance of Pressbooks software since about 2016. So this session today, it's very brief, so we're only going to have time to show you a few of the features of Pressbooks, but we hope that through the session and the hands-on time that we will pique your interest in Pressbooks, and it will encourage you to explore further on your own. Okay, so what we hope to accomplish today, we'll give you a very brief introduction to Pressbooks, and we'll illustrate some features of Pressbooks from the reader's point of view. I'll do a very quick online demo of creating an open educational resource with Pressbooks, and then we hope to have hands-on time to practice at the very end. So what exactly is Pressbooks? Pressbooks, it's a publishing platform with rich built-in accessibility features that instructional designers, faculty members, and others can use to adapt existing open educational resources for their classrooms or create new material from scratch. So the books can be made interactive with the inclusion of videos, audio, accessible math notation, web annotation, and learning activities such as quizzes and forms of assessment. The software itself is based on WordPress, which is software that's used for a large number of blogs and websites, and it was developed by a man named Hugh McGuire in Montreal in 2011. So initially, it was designed for self-publishing, but over the years, it's become one of the most used authoring tools for authoring open educational resources. So here are a few of the things that you can do with Pressbooks. So you can write and publish new content to the web. You can clone content from other Pressbook sites and adapt it. So if it's openly licensed, you can adapt the work and add or take pieces away from it. You can also import content from other resources, not necessarily Pressbook sites. You can also, in addition to the webbook that you create, you can also create other versions. So for example, an EPUB that you could read on an ebook reader or PDF versions. As I mentioned, you can embed all sorts of multimedia content, so video, audio, and the H5P activities that Jamie will be showing you later. And also the social annotation software Hypothesis has been integrated with Pressbooks. That's another layer that can be added on top of it. Okay. There are various different flavors of Pressbooks. There's an enterprise version. So Pressbooks, the Pressbooks people will host Pressbooks for your enterprise, so for your institution or for your consortium. So that's one way of accessing it. There are a couple of different subscription models. So there's a model for groups of people who want to work as a team on a book. And then there's also a model for an individual author who wants to create an individual book. And then there's also, Pressbooks is open source. So it's available on GitHub for anybody who has, the capacity to do that. They can load the software themselves and run Pressbooks at no cost. So it's not really no cost because you need staffing to do that. What we're going to do today when I demo and when we do the hands-on, we'll be using this free trial version of Pressbooks, and it lets us set up accounts and it gives us 7 days to work on a particular book. So that's what we'll be working on today. So at this point, I'm going to turn over to Anne, and she's going to show you Pressbooks from the reader's perspective.
Hi there. So I'm going to be talking about features of Pressbooks that the reader comes to. So this would be what the reader encounters when they first come to an online version of Pressbooks, where they can see a cover if somebody has offered that, and they can go on and read the book. If you look at the read the book information, it also tells you the licensing information in terms of it being, in this case, a CC by MC license, and gives a short synopsis of the book. It also gives options to download. Sorry about that, my phone, I should have turned it off. But it also gives you options to download the book. So you can see various options that the author has allowed. For instance, in this case, the author is allowed for a print PDF or Pressbooks XML downloads. You can also do EPUB, etc. So this is what the reader would encounter if you were doing an open textbook, for instance. Then if you navigate into the read online version, then you get, in this case, this is the preface. This was a book preparation for a dietic practice done last year at TMU as an OER. And then you've got a contents page. And the contents page is a drop down, and you will see the different sections or different sections that the book has been organized into. Then you can pop into those sections, and you can actually get the list of the actual modules, in this case, renal, assess, plan, implement, evaluate. And that's how somebody could go from chapter to chapter. If they were actually wanting to read page by page, at the bottom of every Pressbooks page, there is a bottom bar. It's actually at the very bottom of each web page, and then the reader can actually scroll through page by page. So in terms of materials that you add, this would be, for instance, a book chapter or module, depending on how the author is creating content. And they can add text and images. You can customize captions, etc. And so they could just read the book. It also can add, that's fine. Yep, next one. It can also add H5P. Jamie will be talking more about H5P, but you can actually do H5P in the enterprise and collaboration versions of Pressbooks. You can also import other H5P materials in other Pressbooks versions into Pressbooks, but for the non, it's uncertain how well they always will import in non-collaboration or enterprise versions. So H5P branching, sorry, Sally, can actually, you can have quizzes, you can have all kinds of content that is in addition to your Pressbooks if you use H5P that can make a much more interactive reader experience. As well, all versions of Pressbooks do support LaTeX or MathJax. This is something that came in about, I guess, 4 years ago or so, 5 years ago. Before then, it was actually, you had to code all of your math equations using and needing a knowledge of HTML, but now it actually makes creating scientific text much easier. You still need to know codes and some of the materials, but Pressbooks actually has some really good resources to help support LaTeX creation. As well, you can embed video. So from YouTube, for instance, all you need to do is put in a link. If the embed code is available for platforms like Vimeo or YouTube, you can just embed it via a link. In Canada, anyways, a link is considered a citation only, so that does not involve copyright, even though you can view the video within Pressbooks, so you wouldn't be returned to YouTube to view it. You don't have to worry about copyright concerns. And then you can also embed audio. So you can embed podcasts, you can embed all kinds of things that are audiovisual as podcasts are becoming so popular, as long as they're publicly available. As well, Pressbooks has great features. All versions of Pressbooks have all kinds of text boxes or activity features, etc., that you can add that make it that are useful in textbooks to sort of delineate certain areas. So if you see at the bottom of this page, student tips is one of the ones that you could add to your Pressbooks.
Okay.
So I'm just going to mute myself because my phone is beeping. But Pressbooks, how to create, I'll pass it back to Sally and she will do a hands-on demo.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to try to do a hands-on demo. I do have screenshots of everything that I'm going to be talking about. So if this fails, then we can go back to the presentation and look at those. But let me just escape out here. And what I'm going to do is go to pressbooks.pub, which is the site that we're going to use when we create our accounts for the hands-on. And I've already got an account set up, so I'm just going to sign in at this point. So, and so I will sign in. So this is what it looks like when you first sign into Pressbooks on pressbooks.pub. So you've got a couple of options here. We can create a book or we can adapt a book. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adapt a book. So I'm going to make a copy of something that already exists and then make changes to it. In the hands-on exercise that we have exercise for actually creating a book. So you'll get to see both options if you do that. Okay, so I'm going to click on Adapt a Book. And then at this point, it's asking me, what do I want to adapt from? It's very easy to adapt from another Pressbooks book that exists out there and it's openly licensed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone a book from our Pressbooks site. And we have a book called A Guide to Bears that we use for a lot of our training activities. So I'm just going to copy the URL, add it here. And then it's asking me, what's the URL for the new book? So I'm just going to call it Bears, okay? And then I'm going to click the clone the book button. So it'll make a copy of the book. How long it takes depends on how complicated the book is and how much content's in there and if there's H5P content. So this will take a few seconds because it does have some extra content. So while it's doing that, I'll just mention that you can clone a book from any other Pressbooks site. You're only going to be able to clone a book that's either in the public domain or it has a Creative Commons license that allows you to copy and modify it. So you wouldn't be able to copy anything that has a no derivatives license. So this is all being checked in the background. It's easy to clone from another Pressbook site, but as I mentioned earlier, you can also import content from other resources as well. So if you have an openly licensed EPUB or something else that you want to import, you can do that as well. PDFs, it's not possible to import PDFs. Okay, so my book is being cloned, and you can see it says cloning succeeded. If we had any errors, they would show up here, but it just tells me that it's cloned some front matter, some chapters, some H5P elements, and some glossary terms. So at this point, I'm just going to go to my books and click on the book that I've cloned. And this usually takes a second to pop up. Okay, so now I'm into my book, and you'll see across the top, it says this is the free trial and it expires June 29th. So anything that we created today, we have 7 days to work on. And then at that point, Pressbook sends you an email saying, do you want to subscribe? But it's a good opportunity just to try things out if you want to test Pressbooks. Okay, so along the left-hand side here, we have a menu bar with all sorts of different things that we can do. We can change the appearance of the book. There's various themes that you can apply to the book. There's metadata information, all sorts of complicated stuff here. What we're just going to look at is the organize part, because we want to actually go into the book and just add some content. So I'm going to click on organize, and this shows you sort of the outline of the contents of the book. So we have some front matter with an introduction. We have a section called ordinary bears. We have a section called mythical bears, movie bears, and then we've got some back matter with glossary and appendix. So at this point, we can start adding stuff. So I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to add a new part. So I can click on new part, add part, sorry. And then I'm just going to call this, I'm going to have a section called teddy bears. And I can add content here, or I can just add the heading. So I'm just going to create this new part. And then I can go back. Oops. Okay, now I'll go back to the organize page, and you can see we've added a section or part called teddy bears. So now I can add a chapter to this. So in my teddy bears section, I'm just going to have a chapter called history. So that's the title for the chapter. And then at this point, I can start adding content. So you'll see there's a toolbar here, which is, it's similar to what you might see in Google Docs, Word, or some other word processing package. There are a couple other things that are like specific to textbooks, like this text boxes, and there's a couple other things as well. So at this point, I can start adding content. Let me just see. So I can add content just by typing. So that's one option, or you can cut and paste from some other document you have. So something like Google Docs or Word. I can just cut and paste there. Okay, one thing to be aware when you're cutting and pasting, sometimes it cuts and pastes formatting from the original document. There is a toggle here, so you can paste as text, or if you do put some content in here and it is formatted in some weird way, you can highlight what you want to change and then click the eraser button, and that will clear any formatting. Okay, so we have a little bit of text in here. So we can do something like, we can create a link. So just copy a link here. So I highlight where I want to make the link, click the little link button, and then add my URL in. So that's created a link for us. Okay, so we've got a little bit of content and a link. Let's add another heading here. So let's create a heading called Famous Teddy Bears. So right now that's just plain text, but I can highlight it and change it to a heading. So the heading for the chapter is a heading 1. So the next headings down will be headings 2. And then I can create a list of famous teddy bears. Oops. And so forth. So similar to any other text editor. Okay, so now I'm going to create, another little section. So this will be, it's under my famous teddy bears. So I'll make it a heading 3. And then here, let's say we want to add an image. So to add an image, it's quite easy. There's this add media button here. I just click on that. And there's a media library within each Pressbook. If you have files in there, it'll show you what you've got, but I don't have any files there. So what I can do is just upload from my computer. So I'm just going to select a file. And I've got a Paddington image here. So it's just uploaded that. And then at this point, I'm going to want to add a little bit of metadata to it. So I might want some alt text. And I can put that in as a caption too. It's a bit redundant, but anyway, we can add that there. And then this is a bit more complex. It's too much for us to go into here, but you can add attribution information at this point, and then Pressbooks will compile it and add it at the end of the chapter. But what I like to do is I like to put the attribution information under the image so that it stays with the image in the book. So I'll just insert this into the chapter now. And we've added the image, it's got the caption, and I do have my attribution information. So I'll just add it here. It's not going to be formatted very well, but at least it's there and I'm not going to lose it. Okay. Okay. So Anne showed you a text box. So we could add a text box at the beginning of the chapter. So we can select something here. There's a variety of different ones that we can choose, like key takeaways. You might want at the beginning of the chapter. You might want something like learning objectives. So you can go in and you can make changes. So you don't have to use that title. You could do something, you know, what you will learn this chapter. And then you would add, you know, the things that you're going to highlight in the chapter. Okay, and then at the end of the chapter, you might want something like your key takeaways. So you could add that in. Okay, so Anne mentioned that we can add videos. So we'll put a video under here. So I've got the URL of a video on YouTube. I can just cut and paste that URL. And it just puts it in for you with a little view button. Okay, so at this point, we haven't saved anything that we've done. You can preview what you've done by clicking on the preview button. And this will show you pretty much what it's going to look like to the end user. It's got a couple of other options because we're logged in, like this edit option. But this is what the chapter is going to look like. It's not very beautiful because I've just been randomly adding stuff, but we've got the text box at the beginning, a bit of text. We've got a link here, our video with the play button, and then the additional content. If it looks fine, we could go back and we could just create the chapter at this point. So I'm just going to click the create button. And that will save everything we've done. And then at this point, if we want to do any edits, we can, and then we just click the save button each time we do that. There's one other thing we could do here. We can add footnotes very easily. So all you need to do is put your cursor where you want the footnote to be. And then there's this little icon here, insert footnote. And then it'll ask you to put your content of the footnote there. So hang on, I think I've messed. I don't know if this is going to work. Hang on, I'll do it again because I'll just put it here. And you just cut and paste your footnote in that little box. And it adds some coding to the page. It looks a little bizarre, but when we view it again, you'll see that there's a footnote here, and then that will jump down to the footnote. This null one is the one where I made a mistake. And then you can jump back. So it's quite nice for the footnotes. Let me just see how much time we have. If I have another minute or so, I can just show you how you can add H5P content. So there's this little button here called Add H5P, and the book that we brought in had some H5P content in it. So we can select one of these and just click insert, and it will insert it into the book. It just puts in this little code, so nothing actually shows up here. But if we view the chapter again, oops. It's just taking some time saving, I think. You'll see that a little quiz has been added at this point. Okay, So that's a very quick run through of Pressbooks. At this point, I think I need to turn it over to Jamie so she can talk to you about H5P, and then we'll have some time later if you want to try out any of this. Okay, so I'll just stop sharing.
Thanks, Sally and Anne.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So just give me 1 second to pull that up. Can everybody see my screen here? Okay, great. So I'm actually using H5P to do this little presentation. And so I have a couple of sections to go through. I think the third section, which is about taking instructional design principles into this piece with designing learning objects. I think we're going to move past to do more of a demo. So that way, since we're not doing the breakout rooms as entirely planned, this will give you the chance to create that account. So if you have questions as we're moving into that extra time, you'll be able to do that. So this is actually the branching scenario of H5P. So you can combine different parts, different activities within the branching scenario. This is one of the more complex activities that you can create. So I have slides in here as well as some image hotspots that we'll get to. And so what the branching scenario does is it allows folks to sort of have their choose your own adventure type path through a presentation or through a simulation, depending on how you're using it. So I'm going to go sort of in order just for this being a presentation and introduction to it. But the first path I have here is Intro to H5P. So H5P is a web-based software that enables users to create engaging and interactive content. It is available on any web browser that you have access to. You can upload it to any web browser because it's all based on HTML. So it's available anywhere as long as you have that internet connection and can use the HTML like the short code that we just saw within Pressbooks. And so what you can do with it is you can create low stakes assessments like multiple choice quiz questions or true and false, fill in the blanks. And then you can also create some more complex types of assessments with simulations and identify activities. And there's over 30 different content types to choose from. So how do you use it? H5P is free. So that is the really great thing about it. It is open source, so you could host it yourself. As Anne mentioned, or as Sally mentioned, that you can host Pressbooks using GitHub. You could also do the same if you have the wherewithal to do that. That's a pretty big project, but if you have the ability to self-host, you certainly can do that. But there are some other ways to use it. So using h5p.org gives you access to a sample of the activities that are available, and it gives you practice creating H5P. So you'll notice when you create that account, and we'll do that in just a little bit, that there will be a message that says any content created on the h5p.org site is publicly available, and that H5P cannot guarantee that they will host anything that you create long-term. However, in the 5 years that I've been using H5P, I have not seen anything disappear or become inaccessible. You may also have an LTI connection through your institution. So this would mean that you have access to H5P through your LMS. They work with sort of the big LMS providers, Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, Brightspace. And this means that you can actually upload H5P directly into a course. You can create activities through the LMS. And so that would be something to check with your LMS administrator to see if you have access to it. It would be a contract that your institution has with H5P. So this would be a paid model that your institution goes through. It wouldn't be something that you can do on an individual basis, but there are a certain number of licenses that you can purchase to do this. You might also have a Pressbooks institutional account. As Anne and Sally mentioned, this is something that's available in the enterprise accounts and the collaboration accounts, where you can build that H5P directly into an open textbook if that's what you're creating, or whatever OER it is that you're creating using Pressbooks, and you can add that H5P directly into it. You can also have a personal WordPress site. So I actually have a personal WordPress site. Pressbooks and WordPress are built on the same backend. And so H5P is a plugin for WordPress. And so it's a free plugin that you can upload to your site, and you can use it to build H5P activities if you have different projects that you're working on. And then the last two are LibreStudio and Lumi. LibreStudio is a part of LibreText out of UC Davis. It's a grant-funded project where you can request a free account, and you can have access to all of the activities within H5P and use LibreStudio to store those activities and share them as well. And then Lumi is a desktop creator for H5P, which is, again, it's another free open source tool. And you take your H5P files and you export them as HTML files, which you can then upload to your LMS or provide to your students. And if you're wanting to start with H5P, but you're not ready to sort of create it on your own yet, there are also options for actually searching for H5P. So as we saw in Anne and Sally's demonstration with Pressbooks, that you can actually add H5P directly through Pressbooks. So in the Pressbooks directory, which is the Pressbooks platform for all Pressbooks that are created, you can access the Pressbooks directory. They have a very, very simple search function where you could search by a subject area. They also have a filter function for H5P. So you can very easily add in a filter for H5P and then see any titles based on your subject area or topic that you're looking for, and see what Pressbooks already exist with those H5P activities. And you can very easily take them and reuse them in something else. LibreStudio, I mentioned, you can create H5P there, but you can also, again, search by subject area. You can search by license type, and you'd be able to find H5P activities that are being shared openly on LibreStudio. And then eCampus Ontario H5P Studio is out of Canada. Canada has an extremely robust open education movement, and they share so much of their materials. And the H5P Studio is not something, if you're not a part of eCampus Ontario, you cannot join it or get an account. But because it is based on open principles, all of the H5P activities that are created in that studio are freely available to reuse. So some might not be as analogous if you're moving from Canada to the States, but that's still a great starting point to sort of get an idea of what you could create in a particular subject area. And then lastly, H5P itself plans on having an OER hub. They have not completed this yet. It is only functional in a couple of different accounts. It's only been deployed for testing basically right now, but eventually there will be the option to use this OER hub to both find H5P, host H5P, to share your own H5P, and be able to reuse it and share across platforms. So I'm going to jump back to the beginning here and come into H5P specifics. I see there's a question in the chat. So can you host a WordPress but embed somewhere else like a LibGuide? Yes, you can, and I will get to that in just a second at the end of this section here. So with H5P, it can do a lot of really cool and amazing things, but it does have a little bit of tricky pieces on the back end. So there are some different types of settings that you want to keep in mind when you're working through H5P and creating these individual learning objects. So some of these pieces are the different behavior settings that each activity has, feedback options, metadata and licensing, the accessibility of these learning objects and of these activities, and then sharing and storing this H5P. And so as the inimitable CJ Craig is saying here, it sounds pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of little tricky nuances that are important to have an idea about and sort of consider when you're building these activities. So within the behavior settings, every H5P activity has different settings on the back end. Some of these behavior settings run across similar content types like assessment activities or more informational activities. So for example, assessment content types like multiple choice questions, true and false, those will all have settings for a retry button, whether you want there to be a show a solution button, or requiring any user input before they can move on to the next question, or before they might be able to try that, have that retry button accessible to them. And so those are all important settings to think about depending on what your use case for these different activities are. If they're just low stakes assessments to sort of practice the material, that might be, you might want to have that retry button available right away. You might want to have that show solution button available without requiring any user input. It really depends on what your use case is. So that's something to think about as you're building out different activities and thinking about how you're going to be using them. There's also certain content types you can consider standardizing or branding your content. So you might have specific pieces of your library that you would want to include on all of the activities that you create, so that you know directly where they're coming from. So any viewers know directly where they're coming from, or where they could seek help if there's a technical issue. That's another place where you'd be able to add that information in. The feedback setting is another specific behavior setting on the back end of the H5P activities. Most of the H5P activities have this option to create custom feedback. They are all preset with just correct, incorrect. But as we can see from this quote from the study on focus on formative feedback, clear and specific feedback really encourages learners and helps them to create these deeper connections with the content. So even when doing low stakes assessments, really providing that structured and detailed feedback can really enhance the learning process and the performance of students. So that's a really nice setting that H5P has, that you can really go into detail and provide that specific feedback to students as they're working on these different activities. Because H5P is an open source tool, they have built into every activity all of the licenses, all of the Creative Commons licenses that you can license each activity with. So it's very easy to select those licenses and apply them to every activity that you're using. Depending on your institution, you might have to use a specific license. I know lots of institutions require that everything is licensed CC, BY, and C, so everything is non-commercial, and you can very easily select those for every activity that you create. There's also the option to add additional metadata within this section. And so this would be information about the author, who's creating it, maybe your institution, anything that you would want to use for searching and reporting, and that H5P could categorize that by. This section where you actually enter in this metadata in the licensing is a little tricky to find. So I will make sure to show that when I demonstrate in just a second, but it's a really important piece because H5P is so widely shareable. It's really important to be clear about which license you're using so that folks know when they're coming across it, how they can reuse it and repurpose it for their own institutions and their own contexts. A key component when using really any digital tool or learning technology is its accessibility rating. It's such an important piece to know about the technology that you're using, whether any of the activities or what the deliverables are from that technology, whether they're accessible or not. Many of the H5P activities are fully accessible and they're maintained by the core H5P team, and they're tested using screen readers and other assistive technology, but there are definitely some activities that are not. H5P does keep a running list of all this information in their accessibility documentation on their site, which is linked here, and I can share that in just a moment. But it lets you know which activities are accessible, whether they're maintained by the core team, and whether they're only accessible in certain ways or not. So it's a really important piece to consider when you're trying to figure out which activity you're going to use. If you choose to use an activity that H5P lists as not being fully accessible, it is so important to make sure that you have alternate activities or alternate assessments for your students who may need those. And then finally, with sharing and storing H5P. So there's a question in the chat about putting it on a library research guide or LibGuide. You can definitely do that. With each H5P activity you create, there's the HTML link that you can use, but they also have an embed code similar to an iframe that you can research guides. SpringShare allows for embedding iframes, and so you can use that and have it directly on your research guide as opposed to linking out to that HTML. That would be one place where you could share that if you're thinking about using this for information literacy activities. In the past, I've created MLA activities where students are doing sort of a drag and drop to create a citation. And so that is on the citation research guide that we had. So that's a really nice way where you can host this and share it and have students access it. You can also, again, have it on a WordPress site. So that would be accessible just by creating it directly through WordPress, and it would appear just as this presentation is on my personal site here. If you're interested in a personal WordPress site, Reclaim Hosting is a group that offers really flexible and really inexpensive ways to host and to have a hosted WordPress site and have a domain. It's built for educators and for students. They are part of the Domain of One's Own project. If you've used that at all or heard of that in terms of open pedagogy. So that's a really great place if you're an educator and you're looking to have a site, but you don't want to spend as much as it could cost to host directly through WordPress. Reclaim Hosting is a really nice way to be able to do that. You could also have your local Pressbooks instance. As we saw with Ann and Sally's presentation, if you have that institutional account, you'd be able to create H5P directly in Pressbooks. And then you might be able to host it in your own local repository if you have an institutional repository, depending on what types of data it can hold and what can be imported into it. This would be another way that you would be able to share any H5P that's created. And then again, in the future, once this H5P OER hub is completed and is deployed to all users, that would be another place where you would be able to show that. And so I'm going to go ahead and end the presentation here so that I can go into H5P and do just a quick demo here. So you can go to this, create a free account. I already have a free account here, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. Basically, you just need to have a username, email, and password. Then you can decide if you want to sign up for their newsletter that they send out with different releases about new activities or updates to new activities. So from there, if you come to contents here, I have no new content yet. So I want to go ahead and create new content. And like I said, h5p.org, this is their free version for trying it out on your own before either hosting it yourself or doing an institutional account or purchasing licenses for it. But like I said, basically the warning that they give is that all of this content is publicly available. So if you don't want it to be publicly available, H5P is probably not the right tool for you anyway, since it is built to be shared and be open and have those licenses where you can do that. So they have a sample of all of their different activities. They don't have, I think, all 30 of them, but they have a lot of them. They have the branching scenario, an image hotspot, which is the one I'm going to show in just a second, fill in the blanks, multiple choice. This quiz question set actually allows you to take several of the different assessment type activities like multiple choice, true, false, and fill in the blanks and create a full quiz as opposed to creating those individual questions. So once you decide on an activity that you want to use, all of the activities within H5P have demonstrations and walk you through exactly how to use it. It's really robust documentation that they have for all of these activities. And they also have different versions of them. So they usually show one or two examples of how you could use a particular activity. And this makes it really easy to kind of figure out what it is that you want to do and the different options that you have. There are some really creative activities on here and ways that folks have used different activities that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of just by the title of what that activity is called. So it's a really nice way to kind of see what you can do there. So I'm going to come back down to these examples here and go back to the image hotspots. Actually, sorry, I want to go to my account and I want to create from there. I will add a link to the presentation in the chat once I finish the demo. So I'm back to my contents here. And I want to do the image hotspots. So you can see the tutorial, an example, and then this is where I can actually create it now. So this is that metadata tab that I was talking about before, where you actually choose your licensing and any title information, any type of metadata that you want to add to it. So I'm going to call this library. Actually, I'm going to call it Welcome to the Library. My license is going to be just the attribution license. This would be if your source would be if it's coming from somewhere else. It depends on the type of activity that you're creating, what information you want to include in this metadata section. You can also add additional authors. So if this is something you're collaborating on with somebody else, you can add their name in here. I could also have changed this to my actual name instead of my username. And you can also adjust what that role is. So any additional information about the license that you would want to have, it has all of the regular information that's associated with a Creative Commons license. It will show that, but it will, but this allows you to add anything additional that you would want to. And then again, any additional information for the editor of this content. So if somebody is going to be using this after you, maybe taking over for you, that's where you would add that information as well. So my image that I'm going to use is, where did I put it? This image here. So this is from Pexels. This is a public domain image. And this is where you would add the copyright information for that. So it is public domain. And so when something is in the public domain, you don't necessarily have to add that information, but it is good practice to do so. And so this is from the Pexels site. I don't have the site pulled up right now, but this is something I can go back and edit and add in the actual URL where I got this image from. And so this saves automatically. So once you hit the X button, it will save that copyright information. You can edit your image if you needed to change the resolution or zoom in or crop it or anything like that. And then, of course, you want to add alternative text for this image. I'm not going to do as much detail as I would typically do just for the sake of this demonstration, but I would say image of the library. Oops. And then you could add additional detail if you had more time to sort of spend on that and think about that. Now with the image hotspots, this is where there's going to be places to sort of zoom into the image and provide additional information. You can use a predefined icon, which is what I would typically stick with if you have like maybe you want to really brand it to your institution and you have an icon of your mascot or something, you could upload an image and use that as your icon. So my first hotspot location, you can zoom in on the image if that makes it easier, and then place your hotspot. I'm going to zoom out. And so the header for this is going to be reference desk. I'm just going to do text for this. And then I'm right, this is the reference desk. Come visit your friendly librarian and ask us questions. And then you could add additional items if you wanted to have more than just one content item for this specific hotspot. My recommendation would be for one single hotspot to have one content item, but you can add additional hotspots to the image. So I'm going to add a second hotspot, zoom in here, and I'm going to put it up on the shelves here. Zoom out. Bookshelves, and then addition to just text, you could add a video. So maybe you would want to do something with your shelves and actually have a video of how to find the book on the shelf. So using the call number or something like that, you could actually add in a demo video right to that hotspot. So that's a really neat way that H5P sort of plays on itself with all of the different activities and what you can do. So the book. You can browse or ask a librarian for a specific title. And then I'm going to add one more, and I'm not going to zoom in because I'm going to put it just right here. And I'll call this quiet space. I'm going to do another text. So I'm going to do just those three hotspots for this. This is some of those behavior settings that I was talking about. Image hotspots doesn't really have very much here. This is just for assistive technologies. I would not change this because this is how it is going to be read by those screen readers. So they'll be able to have a close button, and each hotspot will automatically, it has this HTML tag here where it will automatically be able to tell which number of hotspot it is on. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So here is my image hotspot for welcome to the library. So maybe if you're thinking of doing some kind of interactive tour of the library for students and hosting it on a LibGuide, you would be able to do this, and students could click on this and see this is the reference desk. They could click on this item up here and they'd be able to see your information about the bookshelves. And you can make this as detailed as you would need to do. It's a little bit brief just based on timing for today for the presentation. But this is one of the activities that you could do. And like I said, you could add in here additional information. You could add that video in there that would allow you to even have a demonstration of how you would go about finding books in the stacks. Or more information about what a librarian does. Maybe you have a chat service. You could mention that there and add that link in there as well. And let's see, I'm just checking the chat for questions. So it's a little hard to keep up presenting on your own. So just so with the H5P on LibGuides, I currently do not have access to a LibGuides account since I'm now with the OEN as opposed to the community college I was with before. But when you embed the rich media, I think that is the title for it. You can grab an embed code from any H5P activity. Down here, you'll see this embed code. So if you were to copy this iframe, you'd be able to copy and paste this into that embed rich media function within a LibGuide. Let's see if there's anything else I meant. SCORM content. Thank you, Jennifer, for answering that question about SCORM. Yes, the Lumi site can export that. That is also what is within the LTI connections as well. And thanks, Hannah, for your comment too about using the insert media widget. You just have to grab that embed code and that will actually make it appear directly on the LibGuide as opposed to using the link, which then it would link out to it. This would be actually something students would be able to see directly. So that is just a quick example. You can always go back to edit these. There's also, if you were really thinking about doing some kind of library tour, there's actually a virtual tour activity that you can use where you can upload multiple images. So it's as if students are sort of walking around or taking a tour of the campus or of the library. And I will add my my presentation slides, my H5P activity into this. And I think that we are just at our time at 3 o'clock for moving on to the next step. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sally, Ann, and Jamie for the amazing presentation. So yes. So here's a question for our attendees, like, how we want to, what do you want to do from here? So our original idea was like, we were going to have you guys kind of put you into 2 different breakout rooms, since that's not happening. And I saw in the chat, like, people wanted to try out both, at least a couple people mentioned that. So do we want to do that? Like have them do hands-on right here? Or if you are interested in like one more than the other, then Jamie can create her own breakout room, and those who are interested in learning more about H5P can join her. So if you just want to put in the chat that, do you want to stay here and try out both, or do you want to be separated into 2 different rooms? Okay, so I guess like we're going to stay here. Most people are saying like, so I guess like Sally and Ann, like, do you want to go first? And then like, since we have half an hour left, so try like, maybe 10 minutes each to do that. I know it's a very short time, but just to give people a taste of what it is. Lindsay, you okay with that?
I mean, we have a document, a hands-on exercise document, so I could post that. And if people want to start working on that, that was for the Pressbooks.
I've just put it in the chat. So
I did the same thing.
okay, great.
So, I mean, people could start working on that and they could ask questions in the chat. Lindsay, Jamie, I don't know. Maybe yours is a little different, is it?
Yeah, I think what I will do is I will give 2 different options for activities to try, and I will put that information in the chat, and I can also add it to the Word document if it gets a little too much in the chat there. But I will upload the image that I just used. So if you want to practice doing those image hotspots, and then I can also have something for the multiple choice, and I'll be able to put that in there as well.
Typing something now.
Okay. Yeah, that is totally sufficient, Julie, that the cut and paste, just like from the Creative Commons search, and a lot of the Unsplash and Pixabay images from Creative Commons search show up. So you can use the same copy and paste attribution there, and that's sufficient for most Creative Commons things. There's only one warning I'll give you for using Creative Commons cut and paste. You want to make sure that for the Flickr 2.0 licenses, that you actually make sure that there is a link to the 2.0 license. That's a condition of the old Creative Commons license to actually link to the license text. that's just a little clarification. Pressbooks user, it's a great time to ask any questions.
It looks like
I
we
would have to look to see the format for LibreText. I'm trying to remember that. Sally, do you know off the top of your head what LibreText?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
there
what
is a
format
way
they're
to
in.
import in. You can import in HTML files. I think by just cutting and pasting, or Word docs, but and cut and
PDFs
paste
are a
from
problem.
PDFs. PDFs are a problem. You can't. The problem too is that even if you copy, you're using Adobe Pro or some PDF, making the PDF readable, when you cut and paste, there may be some formatting issues. So you do have to use that text box, but it will not solve the problems. But let me just go to LibreText and look at the format outputs. So you should be able to, for instance, I'm on this particular, I'm going to just cut it into the page, put it in the chat. I'm on this particular LibreText. And if you look, there's an introduction for the, it doesn't look like though there's a download button for this. Do you see anything for downloading? Or is it all just in HTML? Oh no, there's downloads. So there's.
You should also be able to import just through the URL. You could try that. See.
How would you import through URL? I don't know how to do that.
Well, it's on the left-hand menu in Pressbooks. There's an import thing, and then when you go to import, it gives you options.
Okay.
Let me just see if I could find it. Yeah, so it says under the import, it says import type, so you can choose the file, or it says import source, and one of the options is import from URL.
And see what comes in. The other option is that you could be just cutting and pasting. We've done that for quite a few public domain tasks and things that are posted there, or where we actually will go into a website if it allows, like it's a public domain title or something, and then we're just putting in web page information. And if you use the text box, then it puts it, if it's anything's weird, you can also clear formatting within Pressbooks. So you can solve those kinds of cut and paste issues. But it would be interesting to know, does it work, Sally? Do you know? Can you see?
I don't
what
know. I was
happened?
going to try to find a book and see if I can pull it in, see what happens.
So I've sent you I've done that business link. I've put a link in
Oh,
the
okay.
chat. Introduction to business.
I'm not sure how well that will work, but we could try it.
So Lindsay asked, Sally's just looking for that, but how can you customize the look and feel of Pressbooks, like make it prettier or have your institutional colors? So we did, you can actually go in, Sally did all of this. So she's looking just for the import and, but we did, I'll give you a sample of our TMU instance.
I did answer that, and I just said you can use customized style sheets, and then there's also different themes that you can use. So.
Yeah. And we also have standardized covers that were created where we can make books look more unified, but it really depends on the author. They may not want to use that. Yeah, I'm actually, LibreText has actually got, I'll just put my little 2 cents in on this. LibreText has actually got quite a bit of public funding, but they haven't really been trying, giving formats that are usable for other platforms. So it would be kind for them to, for instance, provide a Word document or something that would allow to be uploaded into Pressbooks, because PDFs are not easy to use. So Sally's working on that, but it's it doesn't, you know, the whole idea of the 5 R's is that it actually should be fully interoperable and reusable. And Pressbooks actually does download files that can be uploaded elsewhere. So yeah, I would just point out that it just means that there's going to be more manual labor unless Sally can figure unless that tab actually works. I would say the way that it's been done with the cascading pages will mean it won't be able to.
Yeah, so I tried it, and all it downloaded was the first page because they've got it split out into multiple different pages. If they had one huge HTML document, I think you'd be able to pull it in, but because they've got all these separate pieces, it's just pulled in part and stopped.
So I would just say that it's not fully, you know, the idea is that you want to do cross-platform uses. We found that as well with some instructors that are using Articulate Storyline to do their open educational resources. It's great for that platform and it exports out a PDF or module, but it's not great to then upload into Pressbooks and make different versions, because some people may prefer a different version. Yes, actually, Kitty, we did have a student who helped us do our public domain collection, which is over 50 public domain titles. And we had a publishing student who spent a lot of time cutting and pasting or doing things from Adobe Documents. We did do it, but it took a lot of time in terms of redoing content. And it was actually a great project for the 2 students that worked on that. And it doesn't take that long to do the cutting and pasting because Pressbooks has really improved their cutting and pasting capabilities.
We have about 10 minutes left. And this is kind of the time that we were going to do a bit of a wrap up. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you to our presenters today for giving us excellent content. And I know I learned like all these things and I now want to try out. And for being super flexible with the format. I also want to thank all of our attendees for taking time out of your day to for yourself, for some opportunities to learn about something. And hopefully you have like a couple key takeaways of something you can do in your everyday life. Any final words from our presenters? One final tip or trick or something like that.
I don't know if I have a final tip or trick, but like I said, with H5P, there's lots of settings on the back end that you can adjust and change and really make it your own activity. And so really think about, the learning outcomes and the objectives you're trying to reach when, thinking about those activities and how you could create them.
Thank you, Jamie.
Sure.
All right, Mo, any final words?
I'm just looking at the chat. Are there any other questions from, like, you still have a few more minutes, like if you want to ask any questions to our presenters, otherwise let us know how it is. And I'm going to go ahead and put the assessment link here. I know several people have already left, but you will also get the link to the assessment along with the recording that we will send out. So go ahead and put in your final question, comments in the chat while I go find the assessment link.
I did add the link to my presentation on the shared doc, but let me go ahead and drop it in the chat as well. And so it's just on my projects page and it's the first presentation on there.
Well, it looks like Mo got the assessment in the chat. I won't close out for another minute, so you all can do it, but you also get the recording and everything Mo just said. So on behalf of the Student Learning and Information Literacy Committee from ACRL, I just wanted to say thank you again. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. So, all right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.